What's up, guys? I'm Kyle at Fortune Off-Road. In this video, we're installing a new Motobilt stretch gas tank in the YJ. Let's get going. Oh. We've already had a bunch of trail rides in this summer so far. It's time to make some changes, and I usually wouldn't do that during the wheeling season because I've got the Samurai down. It's torn apart in the garage. I don't want to miss out on any off-roading, but we broke some stuff on the Rubicon this last go, and it wasn't anything major. It was a rear shock mounts, and we blew up one shock. That's enough for me to want to start moving things around. And one of the issues I have is the rear shocks are so short how they're oriented right now. I don't want to invest the money into getting some new shocks in that configuration. So I want to start this process of moving this rear axle back a little bit. But the first step we need to do is get the stretch gas tank so we can do that. So the problems I've been having up to this point are really just the gas tank getting slammed a lot. Come off a lot of obstacles and hit that rear gas tank and the skid that goes over it. And it hasn't been a big deal, but it's a thin skid. The gas tank is plastic. At some point, I think we might have damaged fuel pump and the float in there because my gas gauge doesn't work. And it's super annoying to have a gas gauge that doesn't work because you don't know how much gas is in there. And especially on a trail like the Rubicon, when you get kind of far out there, you don't want to be guessing on gas. And I've never ran out of gas on this thing, but I'm also pretty conservative about when I fill up. So trying to get rid of that. The other problem I have is there's not enough room to move this rear axle back. Only moved it back 1 inch, and you can't even really tell. It looks like we didn't move it back at all. Even moving it back only 1 inch with only about 3.5 inches of lift in the rear, it still wasn't able to clearance that skid with the rough stuff diff cover we have on there, so it clearanced itself. So you can see we've got the tank out right now, which is a pain in the butt. It's not difficult, it just requires a lot of moving around. You can see here on the top of my diff cover, all that metal that's scraped off, and that's actually been the gas tank. You can actually see it right there. Self-clearance pretty good, probably about 1 inch into that thing. So this Motobilt gas tank, they say it can accommodate up to an 8-inch stretch. And I was a little bit curious, why were they saying up to? But you know, when you think about it, it makes sense. It depends on how much lift you have on your vehicle, because that's gonna show how close your diff is to the gas tank. Also, which axle are you running? If you're running a bigger axle that has a bigger differential, you might miss out on some of the clearance there. And then lastly, if you have an aftermarket diff cover like I do, that's gonna take up more room, and that's gonna be a factor too. So we're only planning on moving this axle back about 3 inches more, so 4 total. We should be well within the clearance to run this Motobilt gas tank. So as I mentioned, we already have the gas tank out. Pretty simple to do, but it is kind of a puzzle to get it out from over the exhaust and then get those filler necks down. I mean, there's so many videos showing you how to do it. I'm sure you guys can find that. But some tips for taking it out: definitely get all the gas out of it. I just used a 9/16 outside diameter clear hose to get all the gas out. It's pretty easy to siphon it out. You can put your mouth on the tube, start sucking the gas out, and it's not like in the movies where you get the gas in your mouth and you spit it out. If it's a clear hose, you really don't have any excuse to have any touch your mouth. So, you know, just start getting that fluid in there, and then right when it starts to get, you know, I don't know, halfway into the tube, just lower it and it'll start dumping out. You have to have some gas cans ready, especially if you don't know how much is in there like me. So I ended up putting out, gosh, I don't know, it was a lot. I think it was over 15 gallons I had in my tank when I thought it was way less. You get all those out, I'd recommend taking the hoses off of your filler neck, the filler and the vent hose, because if you don't, those are going to be obstacles, and then you're also going to ruin them. I'm trying to replace as many parts as possible while I do this. I've ordered the new fuel pump and new grommets for the vents, and then new filler and vent hose. So hopefully that's enough to get this thing in there. So I've never used this primer before, but I'm a fan of using primer as long as it's not something like Steal It that says you don't need it. But I'm using this is the Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch Ultra Cover Primer. I usually use something a little bit different. I think it's like self-etching is normally what I use, but This stuff is going on pretty smooth. The only bad thing about using this type of primer on bare steel is it can be difficult to see what hasn't been painted yet, and you can miss some spots a little bit easier, but dries to touch in 20 minutes, which is a little bit longer than usual. What I normally do is paint the most important side second if I'm not going to hang it. So in this case, this is the inside, and although it is the inside, it's still going to get moisture in there, still going to get water in there, so we need to paint this too. It doesn't need to look perfect because it's the inside, we're never going to see it, but I paint that flat side second, so when we flip it over, I can get a better, more quality paint job on the other side. Same with these. So for the paint, we're going to go with Rust-Oleum semi-gloss black, and then of course that'll contrast with the aluminum gas tank, so that should look pretty good. Pretty much all of my accessories on the Jeep now are pretty much black with aluminum accents, so that's just going to add to it. It's going to look good. Pad in here, which makes sense. You don't want metal on metal here. Got our fuel vents loaded up, pressed in there. Got our straps put on. I couldn't really find a great way to do this without taking off some of the paint. Got new hardware for all of these bolts that need to go in there, and we can start plugging the hoses up and connecting the wires. We need to get our test run to make sure that this thing's working before we do anything else. Finally got the fuel pump in and tighten it down. These were a little bit too small for the Motobilt bolts that we put in there. I don't know what the deal was with that. I don't know if this is the wrong fuel pump. I don't know if these are a little bit too big, but I had to drill mine out a little bit to get these to fit. These 4 on the aft side of the Jeep, it looks like those ones are all going to stay, but these 3 on the front side of the Jeep, these ones they give you new hardware for, so I just put those in there. Pretty much ready to go, so I'm going to attempt to put this in. All right, so I was wrong about the gas tank thing. It was not easy. I just couldn't do it by myself, so got the wife to help me. We've got it in. So one thing you'll notice on here is I've got some new hoses from the filler that go down, and I don't know if you can really tell, but there's a little bit of a gap on both ends. You can see this side pretty good. The hose doesn't go all the way because this Jeep has a 1-inch body lift, which makes it so filler that's on the body is just a little bit further away than the gas tank that's attached to the frame. So it worked. I would suggest looking into ones that are a little bit longer if you're going to do this. Then my fuel vent hose that's on the driver's side also wasn't long enough to hit the new vent, so I just got some new hose from Ace Hardware. The one on the passenger side fits. All the hardware went together pretty well. It was very difficult to get this in. Couldn't do it by myself. I was surprised with that. It just, this steel plate made it really difficult to get up there. And you know, it's a bummer because you just spent all this time painting this, and it's a nice aluminum gas tank, but as you're putting it up there, it's getting all scratched up, and it is a bummer. But you know, it's black semi-gloss Rust-Oleum paint. I chose that because I know this is going to get hit a lot. You can see it's basically at the same height as my leaf spring, so it's going to get hit with a lot of rocks. My previous one I smashed so much, so yeah, it got scraped up under there, but kind of like, meh, who cares. All right, so did we get the clearance? It's really hard to tell, but let me see. I got to get under the right spot. I think I got to get under the Jeep for this. So before, this diff there was 0 clearance between it and the gas tank. It had just enough room to move up because it slammed into it so hard that it clearanced itself. Now up there you can see all the room we have. We have a ton of room. There's a good look at it. So from the diff to here, I don't know how much that is. Let's see, probably about 5 inches or so. I think once we put the axle back 3 inches, it is going to be close, but it should work still. All right, so the Jeep's been sitting here for a second. Got the hood popped. We're going to have to use some assistance to get it started because it has a dead battery, but I also need to add some fuel into it and make sure all this stuff's working. All right, got the jump pack on. Cycle the fuel pump a couple times. That wasn't bad. So, we do have some gas leaking out. Yep, right on the top where the lines plug in, squirting out some fuel up there. Those things were really hard to tighten on there. The part where we really had an issue was with the hoses that lead into the top of that fuel pump. One of them isn't tightened down enough, and it's a huge bummer because even with a 1-inch body lift, it's really tight to get your hands in there. And see if we can get a shot of it. It's just so dang tight in there that I can't get my fat hand back there with the screwdriver to tighten it up. So I'm not going to fix it in this video, but I'm going to do it in a later one, because what I'm going to do is basically cut out an access hatch in the back so I can in the future change that fuel pump by just opening a hatch. And in this case, I can tighten up those hoses or whatever else I need to do without dropping the tank, because there's no way in hell I'm doing that again after all that. It sounds really dumb, but my favorite part of this is having a gas gauge that works again. My gas gauge has always just been stuck around half, and I couldn't use it. And it kind of sucks driving around without a gas gauge and just always wondering if you've got enough gas in there. But I put 5 gallons in the tank. The gauge started to move down, and it's about at a third, which is perfect because this is a 15-gallon tank. Now, if you're thinking to yourself that 15 gallons is not enough, you wish you had more, I'm with you. I wish I could fit a bigger one back there, but after this stretch, this is just going to be way too tight. 15 is what we have to deal with because I need to leave the tank in the stock location. Speaking of the tank and the fuel pump and all that stuff, I'm gonna have it down in the description, so if you want to see any of this stuff, order it for yourself, go check that out. Thanks for checking out this video, guys. Don't forget to check out the YJ playlist video if you want to see anything else we've done to this thing. Done a pretty good job documenting most of it. See you guys in the next one.